Enjoying your food, Kagura-sama. I apologize if it is most unsatisfactory to a ruler such as yourself. However, the bodies have degraded over the many years you've been gone, the regent said with a bow as the Otsutsuki woman threw a lifeless and soulless husk to the ground amongst a pile of at least 20 bodies. Indeed they have. Though these are hardly enough to bring me back to the power I'd lost. I also sense something different about this world. The sources of power here are vastly different from my own. Such will not suffice for many years until I've regained the strength to pull myself from this wretched form. However, you have done well at informing me of the pathetic state of this world. It has declined exponentially since my time, she said, sitting herself on a makeshift throne crafted by the regent. It had pleased her greatly. It had been a long time since she got to sit upon a throne. It was only unfortunate that she didn't have enough power to retain this form. At any moment, she'd return into the hilt of the blade worn by him. Still, she didn't mind. He'd proved himself the only mortal fit to wield her at this time. Yes, Kagura-sama. Please forgive me for not bringing you anything proper. However, your glorious return should stun the world with great power. I believe it best to consolidate your power. I dare not presume to know the limits of that power, nor your thoughts. However, would it not be better for all to see your mighty return and your ruthless power rather than dare assume the possibility of challenging you as you are? He asked. Kagura frowned for a moment. That was indeed true. Ever since she'd been defeated by Kagaya due to the latter's sickening affection for this lower world, she'd contemplated her rise to power. She'd contemplated bringing forth the rest of the Otsutsuki clan to continue what should have been done in the first place. Besides, the only thing a world like this was good for was the honor of being a part in the evolution of the Otsutsuki. That said, since she'd met this man, her opinion had changed somewhat. Perhaps there were lower lifeforms that could benefit from the evolution if it meant being in service to the Otsutsuki. She could use this man at her side. Besides, she already promised to bear his child. It wouldn't exactly do well for even her to do so without the proper traditions. You have a very smooth tongue. Do not inflate my ego unnecessarily. However, you are quite right. I am in no rush to prepare this world for the return of its true masters. In that time, I shall remember your deeds and your service. However, do keep the buzzing of those flies you hang around to a minimum. I have been complacent with them, but their disbelief is rather aggravating, she instructed. The regent bowed. As you will, Kagura-sama. I apologize for their actions. I shall make it remedied, he answered, a sly smile curving up his face behind his mask. See that you do. Now, explain to me why I continue to sense the aura of death and decay. Though it is not much, if left to grow it has the potential to surpass even my own power. I must know why, the former heiress to the Otsutsuki clan said as she lifted one of her long legs over the other. Regent lowly smiled behind his mask. Ah yes. You see, Kagura-sama, there is a king in the making upon this world. He has gained the favor of the god of death. Though his ascension is slow due to his own weakness, it will be inevitable that you two shall meet, he answered. Kagura narrowed her eyes. A king to oppose her and the Otsutsuki, she almost thought it laughable. However, there was a constant feeling that made her think otherwise. That was the Otsutsuki goal, to constantly evolve in order to obtain godhood. If this avatar of death could contend with her, then that would make her plans a little more troublesome. The regent, almost knowing her thoughts, bowed. It is no concern, Kagura-sama. As I've said, this avatar has many clear weaknesses which he must overcome to even consider obtaining his royal status as a king. In fact, I imagine he will not be ready before you've obtained your true power, he answered before he felt her murderous gaze on him. Are you saying that it would be impossible for me to defeat him, a lower life form, if he somehow obtains this pseudo-godhood? She asked. Unperturbed by her great aura, the regent shook his head. Perish the thought, Kagura-sama. However, this is a man who gained the favor of a god, the realm which you and your great clan have attempted to get into since its very creation. It would not bode well for you to underestimate the divine realm. There is a reason many beings fear the god of death, he said. That was true even if it irritated the Otsutsuki princess somewhat. Aside from that, she'd also need to gather the rest of her clan. They would destroy this world that Kagaya seemed to care for so much. Naturally, a few select individuals would be privileged to service the main family. This one before her obviously won. Very well. You make a valid point. It is true that compared to the realm of true gods, the Otsutsuki fall short. I am not unaware of our weaknesses. I fear even they have degraded since my time as have been gone. However, I will not be caught unaware of him. What is his name? She asked. The regent's smile widened to its fullest. Oh, poor naive princess of an otherworldly clan. Yes, my lady. His name is. The regent slowly walked out of Kagura's chambers and through the rest of the facility the group had been using for their activities. When he came into the main room, he noticed Obito and Nagato waiting for him. You have yet to tell us why we have to deal with this woman. I will admit she's very powerful, but she's also from a long-gone clan. We waste time with this nonsense, Obito said while the regent patted his shoulder. Worry not, my friend. Kagura-sama is more powerful than you can imagine. It would not do well to have her against us. Besides, it's better to have her willing than unwilling. We dance on the edge of madness because one wrong move and she will destroy us. Make no question that Kagura-sama is capable of that. The only reason she doesn't is because we constantly prove we're lesser than her. Is it not easy to give the person the lie they desire rather than the truth they hate? He asked. And what happens when she does return to her power? What chance will we have? Nagato asked. The regent chuckled. Then we'd best get used to having a new master. Should she complete her power before we've laid the proper groundwork, there will be no hope for not just this world or any world should that happen. However, while we can't make use of the Biju anymore, we still have a use for them in another capacity, he said. Obito narrowed his eyes. What do you mean we can't make use of the Biju? He asked. The Biju were greatly needed to continue the Tsuki no Mi plan. That was the reason all of this had even happened. However, it all seemed to be going downhill lately. Everything that should have been happening wasn't. And, all of this seemed to revolve around Uzumaki Naruto. The regent stared at the two Akatsuki members. He took off his mask for only a moment, allowing the two to see the smile on his face. The weapon you're planning will only ever be imperfect from now on. The Kyuubi most likely is not composed of chakra anymore. Instead, it's become an even greater and stronger being than before. With it already augmenting his already impressive heritage, Uzumaki Naruto's one of the most powerful people in this world. Would you really think that the chakra of mortals could repel the power of a true god? Naturally, my king staying in the presence of a true god for many years, he said. Obito and Nagato glanced at each other. So the Kyuubi has been feeding off this god's power. And what god is that? The former asked, trying to contain his own anger. The plan was already a mess. The Jinchuriki they'd killed, and the Biju still in the Gedo Mazo were not enough at all. They still needed the Sanbi, Hachibi, and Rokubi. Obito had planned to already have the last two before moving on to the Kyuubi. However, Konan's betrayal had left a rather large hole in the Akatsuki operations. Kisame was currently hunting the Hachibi while Zetsu was working on finding the Rokubi. So far, there wasn't much success in either regard. Now they were being told that the Kyuubi might no longer be comprised of chakra. If it wasn't, then the full power of the Gedo Mazo would never be realized. The regent chuckled. The man who invented it doesn't want it himself. The man who bought it doesn't need it for himself. The man who needs it doesn't know it when he needs it. For that is the realm of the great deity and the one who time considers her greatest friend and her greatest enemy, he said before he pulled his mask down and walked away. Nagato and Obito watched the man leave. Both frowned. I do not trust him, the Diva Path stated, and Obito quickly nodded. There's no need to, however the growth of Uzumaki Naruto has been very concerning. I'd hoped to have Uchiha Sasuke at my side at least to take care of the Hachibi. I still don't believe Uzumaki Naruto can contest with you. We will have to move things forward while Iwa handles the Chunin exams. I'll take care of the Sanbi. The Chunin exams will be a perfect time where I can take her, he replied. Nagato frowned. You seem quite confident. The Jinchuriki of the Sanbi is also protected by the Uzumaki clan. If you meet with Uzumaki Naruto again, you let me worry about that. I don't care what god he has backing him. He will not stand in the way of our plan. I will contact you soon. There are things I must get ready for, he said, vanishing away while Nagato watched him leave. The Diva Path narrowed its eyes, looking at the hallway the regent had just walked from. Even now, he narrowed his eyes. Whether Uzumaki Naruto, the Otsutsuki clan, Uchiha Madara himself, Nagato was not deterred. All would fall before the true God, the one to rule over all others. Especially you, Conan. X. And you're sure you're okay? You nearly blew up the whole damn room you two were in. I know you Uzumaki are fucking freaky, you're related to this bitch over here, but leave the rest of us out of it, Suigetsu said before he was slapped into a puddle by Karen. The others watched the scene before Conan turned to Naruto. Are you alright? She asked, taking notice of Naruto's rather different personality. He'd been like this ever since he woke up. Everyone, even Yura, was unsettled by the bright color of his scleras. It was a rather interesting contrast to his blue eyes. Even Kodohime and Jugo were surprised at the different mood surrounding the blonde. However, Naruto chuckled. You guys don't have to look at me like I gained a second head Datbeo. I'm fine. I'm a little disoriented, he said. For him, it was no surprise why. He had recently merged his soul with Suiren, hoping to bolster her defenses as well per the Kyuubi's instructions. How are you doing? He asked while Suiren sat on the ground, meditating. I think I'm fine, Shikyo-sama. We resonate fairly well right now. Your honsho is very energizing, she replied as she continued to focus, seeing the world through her master's eyes. She'd done this before, but now felt a little more personal. It was a nice feeling. The feeling of a heartbeat and the breathing of air through the nose seemed like something so new, yet refreshing. She felt her transparent body being strengthened with this bond. Good, we'll continue like this through the day, he said before he focused on the others. Should we move on now? Yura asked and Naruto slowly nodded. Yeah, we continue heading to the east. I hope we can get there in the next 2 days, but we're not in any rush. We also have to be careful because we don't know how many route agents Danzo will have covering wherever he's situated. We'll set up a camp before we enter the area between the Earth and Wind countries. Conan and I will survey the area. Then we'll move forward with the rest of the plan, he said, continuing to feel Suiren's energy flowing through him. In some areas, it felt hard to breathe, but he kept up with it regardless. Kyuubi was right. He had to stop complaining. Cool, I'm in the mood to cut something. Suigetsu said while Kodohime folded her arms. Well, how should we identify these route agents if we see them? If they've been around this area for so long, then we don't know if we can tell the locals from the spies. They'll take notice of us right away, she said. Naruto smirked and Suiren hummed, already knowing the idea her devious master had in his head. You leave that to me, he said mysteriously. The others looked at each other curiously, but they had no further time to elaborate. They could only guess while they left the town and traveled through the dense overgrowth of trees. From one branch to the other, the group of 7 dashed through the trees. Unfortunately, Naruto was lagging behind the others a little bit. Ni-sama, are you okay? She asked. Naruto slowly nodded. Yeah, just getting used to things, he chuckled as they continued on their way. Suiren groaned to herself, attempting to continue the bond just like Pakura instructed. It was harder than it looked. The other spirits watched. Kyuubi observed the action and growled. The brat's coordination with the woman is off. This won't be enough to make her rank up like you did, he said, his white tail swirling around while the others observed. I did training with Naruto-sama and Kushina-sama. That might have something to do with it. There was always a saying that there is no greater trust than those who fight together. Besides, while I've merged with him I've gotten a look into some of Naruto-sama's past and his feelings. It's funny. Despite his personality, he doesn't trust easily. In fact, he has some of the most guarded senses I've ever felt, she replied. The Kyuubi frowned when he heard this. It was true. While Naruto was the type of person to draw all kinds of people to him, his history of first impressions was pretty bad. Also, the Kyuubi had been with Naruto nearly all his life. He'd seen the struggles his warden went through. Naruto, if you do not make it to your destination before the sun sets, then stop and make camp. You'll be training with Suiren until late night. It's probably not enough for you to just merge together. Knowing your stubbornness and simple mind, you'll probably merge better when you learn to battle, the Kyuubi said, his deep voice reverberating through the corners of Naruto's mind. Alright, that also sounds like a, who the fuck are you calling simple? Naruto exclaimed, unknowingly causing everyone to laugh. Suiren chuckled and unknowingly eased the merger between herself and her summoner. Wolf floated around Lamb and chuckled. Well, he is a bit of an idiot, isn't he, Lamb? The ferocious predator asked as the archer of the duo hummed to herself. He is rather simple, dear Wolf. However, that is not always a bad thing. In fact, it might be one of his more endearing qualities, Lamb replied. Naruto narrowed his eyes for a moment or two. Nevertheless, he continued onward, burying this odd sense of anger deep into his chest. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he buried it, there was one who could sense how he felt. Suiren could sense the slight increase in Naruto's anger. As the one merged to him the most, she felt everything that he felt, whether he was aware of it or not. Naruto-sama is no idiot, she said firmly. The others quickly stopped their chuckle when they looked at her gaze. She frowned at them all and returned back to her own activities. Naruto heard her fierce statement and he lightly smiled, his heart and his steps notably softer. He and Suiren felt their union strengthen. The blonde sped across from everyone on his team, leading the charge. Watched him move in shock while the former Kurigakure Kunoichi felt a sense of peace flourish through her spirit. The group of 7 moved quickly through the elemental nations from sunup to sundown. Everyone took notice of Naruto's more brightful disposition. Though they hadn't made it to their destination, that didn't matter. The rest of the day was spent with rigorous training. However, it was training that neither Naruto nor Suiren complained about. 6 against 1, everyone helped Naruto train. At least 2 hours dedicated to the merger between him and Suiren were brought into the day. You okay, Suiren? Naruto asked while Suiren smirked, continuing to feel the merger between herself and Naruto. Both of them panted, clearly out of breath. Perfect, she said as Naruto grabbed his blade, Suiren's form right on top of his own. The blonde withdrew his blade and clashed with Suigetsu before he noticed a load of paper bombs and kunai around them courtesy of Konan and Kodoheim. Suigetsu quickly dropped into a pool of water while Konan and Kodoheim activated the bombs and the kunai tags. An overpowering explosion rocked the plane around them under the hue of orange from the night sky. Suigetsu quickly reformed while Yura spoke. Karen, ascertain Ni-sama's position. Make sure we can find him. Jugo, protect Karen. Ni-sama will try to target her, she exclaimed before everyone noticed the smoke begin to settle. Right, Karen said as the others noticed Naruto was gone. The redhead quickly held up a hand sign and closed her eyes. Jugo stood in front of her as she scanned for her cousin. However, she was stunned into silence. Jugo, look out, she shouted as she pushed him out of the way. Everyone turned to their position in time to see a flash of light rip through the ground. Jugo turned around and gawked as a wall of water shot into the air from the slash had been made. The others watched Naruto come out into the field, an armor of water circulating around him and his blade. What the? Kodoheim said, echoing everyone's thoughts as Naruto stepped on the puddles of wet ground. His hair had effortlessly turned from blonde to silver. Yura quickly slammed her hands together and touched the ground. Raiden, Jaibashi, Yura shouted as a spray of lightning ran out of her hands. The powerful lightning jutsu crushed through the ground, tearing up whatever it could as it made its way towards Naruto. Yura's jutsu struck true. She grinned when the lightning struck the water and electrocuted all it touched. However, the grin slowly fell off her face as the lightning seemed to move in tandem with the water armor. The streaks that fell through the water made the others take a step back. What the fuck? Since when could he do that? Suigetsu asked as his hands gripped the handle of his sword. He felt a bead of sweat fall down the side of his face as lightning crackled through the air. Some of it ripped off from the water armor and moved through the ground while Naruto and Suiren continued to hone their connection. Raw! Jugo roared as Naruto and Suiren turned around to see the orange-haired young man descending upon them, his skin turned dark and his hands enlarged like those of a brawler. He crashed into the lightning-powered water armor. The ground beneath Naruto's feet ruptured into 1,000 pieces. The others shielded their eyes while Konan flew high in the air. Not even a second passed before they heard Jugo scream. The water armor buried a fist into Jugo's stomach, propelling him past the others before they could even turn around. Jugo! Karen exclaimed before she suddenly fell back as Naruto appeared in front of her, his sword hovering over his head. Suigetsu quickly dashed in front of him and blocked the sword strike, but the lightning continued to course through his body. However, the white-haired man couldn't meet the gaze of the summoner of the Shinigami. His very being told him not to. If he did, then he'd fall to pieces before the gaze of death that was no doubt waiting for him. However, that feeling slowly faded as Naruto closed his eyes. Alright, that earns a break, he said before he fell to one knee. Yura quickly ran over to him while Konan and Kodoheim relaxed themselves. Karen sighed before she walked over to Jugo. Hopefully, the bastard was just as tired as the rest of them. No one needed him to be going into a violent rampage. So how do you feel now? Yura asked while Naruto felt Suiren break away her spirit from his. He just laughed as the power slowly faded from his body, the water armor splashing over his head while he dispelled the lightning around it. I'm sure I'll have a headache tomorrow, he chuckled to her while Suigetsu grumbled. You and everyone else on this damn team, he grumbled as Naruto snickered. Don't relax yet, brat. We're gonna be training some more between you two. Then we'll repeat with the next person until you've gone through the others. It's the only way to give you some defense from being taken over, the Kyuubi said, and the young Uzumaki patriarch sighed. No rest for the weary. True to form though, Naruto continued his training dutifully. As everyone else set up camp, he continued to train as per the Kyuubi's instructions. When asked about the practices and how the fox knew them, the Kyuubi snorted. I've had nothing to do but watch you make stupid decision after stupid decision. It only stands to reason that I'd know of all the things you do and more. I've had plenty of time to watch, he responded, and Naruto accepted that. However, there was another constant that made him fall in love even more. Yura stayed with him. While everyone else showered or ate dinner, she stayed with him and helped him train. No matter how late it got, she still blessed him with a bright smile and her willingness to remain beside him. Clearly, Yura hadn't quit Konoha half-heartedly. She was fully prepared to be banished with him. Truth be told, Naruto wondered how many people would go that far for him. Of course, out of concern for her, he didn't really approve of her choice to leave Konoha, but it was the greatest thing anyone had done for him. Naruto surprised Yura with a kiss. MMMN. She groaned in surprise before she pushed him away. I'm covered in dirt, Ni-sama. You don't need to kiss me right now, she said while he smiled. You'll never be dirty to me, Yura. I'll always kiss you, he said, which made her blush. The older sister of Yuri pushed a piece of her red hair to the side. Damn it, that was a little cheesy, but Yura couldn't help falling for it. It could only be the truth when it came from Naruto. Unfortunately, their time together couldn't progress further as Naruto quickly noticed Asuma appear in front of them. Naruto-sama, he said as he knelt in front of them both. Due to her continued proximity to her lover, Yura saw the former Konoha Jonin and heard him speak. Asuma, what are you doing here? The blonde summoner asked. The bearded Jonin fervently nodded. I've been informed by Kushina-sama that Konoha greatly requires your assistance. They need you back at the village as soon as possible. Tsunade-sama has agreed to allow you to temporarily enter the village for the duration of this dangerous assignment, he said. Yura gasped, a smile on her face as she turned to her lover. However, the smile slowly fell when she saw the deep, angry frown on his face. Is it absolutely important? He asked, gritting his teeth as Asuma bowed his head a little lower. I wasn't informed of the whole situation, but her voice was frantic, he said, with a lot of urgency in his voice. Naruto bit his lip and clenched his dirty fists. Finally, he sighed and released his anger. Alright, I'll head back as soon as possible. Thank you, Asuma, the blonde said as dismissed the spirit of the deceased Konoha Jonin. Asuma nodded and flew away back to Kushina's blade. Ni-sama, Yura asked slowly, seeing the troubled expression on her lover's face. His hair shadowed his eyes before he grabbed his Hinoken scarf and unfurled it from his neck. Yura-chan, go get the others. I'll break the news to them in a moment, he said. Yura touched his shoulder and then his cheek. She stiffened when she felt how cold he was. He grabbed her hand and ran his thumb over the top of it. Yura couldn't help herself any longer and sighed. Ni-sama, what's the matter? Aren't you happy to go back home? She asked. Naruto chuckled and lowered his head even more. Home, I wonder if I even know the meaning of the word, Yura-chan, he said before he dropped her hands and walked away. Yura watched him go before she went to get the others for his orders. Meanwhile, as Naruto continued to walk, a dark spirit, its body long and slithering like that of a vile serpent. It leaned into his ear. Just look at what they take you for, Shikyo-sama. The village can't even run itself for one day without you there to help clean up their mess. They take you for a fucking DOF. They take you, the king of all spirits, for a mangy mutt that'll wag its tail when a treat dangles in front of it. What'll happen to you when it's over? You'll be cast aside as you always have. First, they take away your dream. What will they take next from you? Your family, your life. We should teach them a lesson. Use me, Shikyo-sama. Use me and make the world knee. Be gone from our master, wretch. Suiren screamed, releasing a wave of tempered honsho at the vengeful thing. The vile spirit hissed before it dispelled back into the realm of the dead. However, the former Kiri Kunoichi felt her master's angst. She could feel the nerves in his chest. Unfortunately, she couldn't say anything. She didn't know what to say. Neither could anyone else that stood deep in the realm of Naruto's mindscape. No one wanted to say it, but they all agreed with the corrupted ghost, even the Kyuubi. The news from Asuma made the nine-tailed fox snarl with rage, reigniting that old fire of hatred that had been steadily dwindling for the village. Yes, it might have been slight, but the Kyuubi had started on a somewhat neutral opinion of the village that had been the cause for its capture. That opinion had been effectively soured before the past few days. However, no one knew the feeling more than Pakura. The former Suna Kunoichi could see the strain on Suiren's face as she tried to maintain the connection between Naruto and herself. After a moment, she walked over to Suiren and patted her shoulder. Let me merge with Naruto-sama for a moment. I hope I won't need to stay long. I'm not starting to understand why he might have taken to me faster than anyone else, she said. Suiren glanced at her friend and slowly nodded. She separated her honsho from Naruto's, floating away through the darkness while Pakura took her place. As soon as the summoner and summoned were connected, Naruto felt his breathing ease up. He felt the power of Pakura's presence within him. As a summon, and even more as a kindred friend, she calmed him like no other friend. He couldn't understand why Suna would throw away a fine woman like this. Neither Naruto nor Pakura spoke to each other. They didn't need to. Completely merged with each other, they fed off the thoughts of the other. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and smiled. He was still very much upset, but then again that was the life of shinobi. In fact, that seemed to be the history of all nations. The sacrifice of the individual for the many. After a moment to himself, Naruto returned to see everyone around a large campfire. What's the matter now? Suigetsu asked as the others turned to face their blonde leader. Naruto scratched the back of his head. I've been informed that I'm needed back in Konoha. Something very serious is going on and I'm to go right now, he said. The others looked at each other, the light of the fire reflecting the uncertainty in their eyes. Karen stood up. If you tell me you took us from Uzushio on this personal mission of yours, only for you to leave us in the middle of these woods. Cousin or not, I'm gonna, whatever Karen was gonna say was rendered null when everyone stared into the sight of Naruto's unforgivingly cold gaze. Kodohime even wondered if this was the same boy that Sasami spoke about. In him was a gaze of oddly cold wisdom, something almost otherworldly even. Definitely not evil, but rather unsettling. An existence beyond her own. No, maybe an existence slowly delving beyond that of the caliber of the elemental nations. An existence beyond mortals, she thought to herself while Naruto sat down. Calm down. I'm not canceling the mission Datbeo. I'll just create a clone and it'll take over the mission while I head into Konoha. Once my business there is finished, I'll rejoin the rest of you. The clone's pretty damn sturdy, so it can take a hit or two. The plan'll stay the same and so will all of you with your payment. You have my word, Naruto said as he quickly created a clone. He then stood up and held out his hand. Jikuyugami, he called out, materializing the portal in front of the group. As always, its body was impressive to look at. The ground beneath it broke into 1,000 pieces. The winds from its mighty form blew through the faces of everyone, blowing away the campfire. I'm never gonna get used to seeing that, Suigetsu said, more to himself than to anyone else. Jugo wordlessly nodded, a bead of sweat falling down his face. Naruto turned back to Yura and smiled. Wanna say something to Yuri for a moment? He asked. Yura laughed and shook her head. Yuri's a young woman. She doesn't need me coddling her anymore. Besides, I'm not a kunoichi of Konoha anymore. It probably wouldn't look good if I go back, at least not like this. Besides, even if I did, I could only stay in the house. If I can do something that'll help you out with your mission, then that's enough for me. Go help out Konoha. I don't think they deserve it, but it's still the village that helped raise you and by extension you raised our clan. Perhaps it's worth that much, she answered as she caressed his cheek. Naruto grabbed her hand and kissed hand before he stepped into the portal. He glanced at the clone and the clone gave an accepted nod. The blonde swordsman fully stepped through the portal. Yura waved him off as the portal closed. Meanwhile, the clone clapped his fingers. Alright, just because the boss is gone doesn't mean you guys are gonna slack with me. Remember, depending on how far we make it, we'll be enacting the plan. He said. The others gave a rather weak yell of applause while Yura laughed. The portal opened and Naruto stepped out. As his feet landed on the ground, he found himself in the training fields for the Uzumaki clan. He watched the portal close behind him and exhaled slowly. Thank you, Pakura-chan. I'll be fine now, he said. Pakura smiled and disconnected herself from her summoner. That left Naruto with only himself and his own thoughts. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki smelled the air of the village hidden in the leaves. He noticed the lights still on in the compound. He walked to the door and slid it open. A smile came onto his face when he saw Yukimaru studiously drawing seals on the ground while Fuka watched him. He also saw Tayuya grumbling to herself as she struggled writing a mission report. Komachi was also there, showing Yuri the right stances for not only holding a kunai, but for also disarming them. However, all those lessons stopped when they heard the door close. Holy shit. You son of a bitch, what are you doing here? Tayuya asked while Yuri sped across the living room. Nii-chan, you came back, she said as she crashed into him. Naruto doubled over and even Kyuubi felt the wind get knocked out of him before the blonde hit the wall. He and Yuri slumped down to the floor. Hey, Yuri-chan, he chuckled painfully, rubbing his hands through her hair before he groaned when Yukimaru crashed into him as well. Why yup, they were both getting stronger than he realized. More pain came when he was punched in his shoulder by Tayuya. I'd punch your ass harder than that if you didn't come back, she exclaimed while Fuka and Komachi walked over to him. And noted, jerk, he said, more like groaned, before he got his hair ruffled by Komachi. Fuka quickly helped him up before he rubbed his arms. Yukimaru, a wide smile on his face, spoke. Naruto ni, I thought you were banished from the village. Why are you back? He asked. Naruto frowned for only a moment. That single question pushed a lot of questions through his mind. Just based on that question, whatever happened his mother hadn't bothered to tell the others about it. If she didn't, then clearly it was something more serious than he thought. Granted, he should have assumed that given that Kushina would send out Asuma to inform him. Hell, the fact that he was even back in the village should be an indication. Well, Yukimaru, that's what I'm about to find out. Anyone know where Ka-chan is? The patriarch of the Uzumaki clan asked. The others looked at each other, but before they could answer, everyone noticed Kushina coming down the stairs. She smiled as she noticed her son. Impeccable timing, Sochi, especially since Asuma hasn't even gotten back yet, she said while Naruto laughed. Don't I always run when you come calling for me, Ka-chan? He asked while she smiled. It's one of your more endearing qualities. Alright, let's not crowd our clan head. It's getting late and you'll be able to spend time with him after all the important stuff is finished. Besides, Yuri and Yukimaru need to go to bed. They have missions to get to in the morning, she instructed. Yukimaru sighed before Fuka patted his shoulder. She has a point. Come, Yukimaru, finish up your studies and prepare for bed, she said, making the adopted Uzumaki nod his head. He hugged Naruto one more time before he moved back to the couch to finish his studies. Yuri quickly kissed him, proceeding to walk away with Komachi to finish her own lesson. Meanwhile, Naruto joined his mother. She grabbed his hand and led him up the stairs towards their bedroom. As soon as they closed the door, Naruto embraced his mother and kissed her. Kushina sighed, her hands roaming the back of his neck and hair. Her son, her lover, smelled of the forest. It was a very odd, intoxicating manly smell that drove her wild. His rough, calloused hands caressed her cheek as she nibbled on his tongue. Her lips pushed against his, and how she wished this was a much different circumstance. As immoral as it might sound, she wished they were married already. She could just imagine herself in the arms of her powerful son, his vigorous thrusts pushing his girth inside her in the ways she loved. Her as his mother, and his wife. Unwilling to help himself, Naruto shamelessly grabbed his mother's ass and lifted her up. Her legs wrapped around his waist as they continued to kiss themselves into their own fantasy. He pushed her against the wall. Kushina, very much thrilled by the power of her son, sighed blissfully. This dominance was as stimulating as ever. When the two stopped kissing, Kushina huffed. What are you thinking about right now, holding me up like this? She asked. Naruto chuckled. Fucking you, loving you, marrying you, all of the above in any particular order, he replied as Kushina shifted her thighs and felt the erection in her son's pants. Then we'll have to make plans soon. We haven't had a good time to discuss our wedding. Besides, Yuri's constantly telling me to hurry up. She misses you just as much, Kushina said before she signaled to be let down. Naruto did so and Kushina flapped the neck of her shirt. She'd need a fucking cold shower after that kiss. Meanwhile, Naruto grabbed a chair and sat in it. Alright, what's the problem? What's so bad that Tsunade Bachan had to overturn my banishment, at least temporarily? He asked. Kushina sat on the bed and shook her head. I won't mince words, Sochi. The Jashin cult is in Konoha. Yugao had Kakashi and Makoto investigate one of the bases. By a revelation from Kakashi's summon, Pakun, there were over 1,000 chakra signatures of them in the village. Many of them range between civilian and Jonin. We have no idea where they are, who they are, or how they're operating. As far as we're concerned, they could be anywhere and we're none the wiser. Sochi, we need you to pull out the spirits of the victims, or even the Jashin members themselves and have them locate the agents in the village. However, we have to make sure to do it discreetly. If they realize they're getting picked off now, then who knows what they'll be forced to do in the village, she replied. Naruto narrowed his eyes, processing all the information he'd been given. I assume since you need me, that means that the clan's best suited to tracking. They aren't as suited for this situation as we might want them to be. Again, these people have been in the village for a long time. I'm sure they've got techniques to mask themselves from our clans. Psychotic though they aren't stupid, she said. Naruto nodded in affirmation and leaned back in the chair. Alright, so should I get started right now? He asked. Kushina shook her head. Hold off for now. Tsunade doesn't know you're back in the village and we need to tread carefully here. You've also never been inside her house so you can't teleport there. Tell me, could you get to her in the 5-minute window of your time-stop jutsu? She asked. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I'm confident in my speed, or I would be if I hadn't been training before you called me here, he said. Training? Naruto huffed, rubbing the back of his head. While we try to find out this darkness thing inside me, and get rid of it, Kyuubi said that every day I'll be training with my other summons. For some reason, Pakura's grown much more powerful and they think that if I make the others more powerful then that can protect me from getting possessed by these powerful spirits, he said. Kushina placed a finger to her chin. Ah, right. That's another problem we'll have to deal with. Well, forget it. If they were going to move, then they would have been bolder. For now, we just have to focus on not giving ourselves away. Since Yugao told Tsunade, she'll no doubt have a plan for us. Besides, your use of the portal will be reset in the morning and we can just head to Hokage Mansion without raising any suspicion. We'll actually need you more than I thought, but for now, you need a bath and... Kushina suddenly paused when the door slammed open. Alright, I'll honor this celibate thing you two are doing until you're married, but I think I'm at least owed a bedtime partner. I haven't gotten Nichan for like, a month. If you think you're gonna hog him, you've got another thing coming. Yuri exclaimed as she marched into Kushina's face and snarled, her red hair waving in the air. Kushina laughed. Little girls don't deserve bedtime partners, she said as she pushed her face against Yuri's. Old ladies, don't either Datbayan. The two Uzumaki ladies growled at each other while Naruto rolled his shoulders and shook his head. Nope, a wise man chose his battles. That definitely wasn't one of them. By the time the clan head of the clan finished his shower and his bath, the two were still arguing. So into arguing were they that they didn't even take the chance to admire his form as he stripped and got into his bedtime clothes. It was only when he pushed both of them on the bed that they acknowledged him. Where do you get these attitudes? He asked before he turned out the light and fell to bed. Kushina and Yuri sighed, putting their battle on hold. They each grabbed one of Naruto's arms and fell asleep. Yuri moaned peacefully as Kushina snuggled against Naruto's shoulder. The next morning, Naruto woke up and Yuri was already gone. Most of the compound was quiet before he slipped out of bed. As always, Chiriku was right in front of him, staring down at the sleeping couple with a smile on his face. He floated over his master and smiled. Wake up, Naruto-sama. We have another lesson. Something tells me we won't have much time for a proper one, so we must make the best of what we're given, he said with a smile. Naruto grumbled, but found himself getting out of bed. For the next hour or so, he meditated with Chiriku about the nature of life and his own desires. In the end, the lesson was concluded with the monk warning the blonde. The biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves, Naruto-sama. What is the biggest lie you refuse to acknowledge? Truth be told, Naruto had told himself too many lies to count while growing up. He didn't even know which one to start with. Unfortunately, he couldn't even think about it too much. His mother woke up and they were already getting dressed. Once they were dressed, they nodded. Naruto quickly opened a portal and they stepped inside. Immediately, they stepped out of the portal and stood in front of Tsunade in the Hokage mansion. Both noted that the blinds were closed this time. As for Naruto himself, he also took note of his mother's mood. She wasn't happy to look at Tsunade. To be honest, he couldn't say he was any different. Tsunade watched the two of them appear. She really had been dreading this moment. Given their history, it was probably needlessly harsh that she not at least see him off. However, no matter how much Naruto meant to her, she couldn't afford to show favoritism. Compared to what the council had tried to sentence him with, banishment was the best she could offer. She just never assumed they'd need him back so quickly. "It's good to see you, brat," Tsunade said, a rather pitiful attempt at some small talk if she had to say herself. "It'd be better if it wasn't only because you needed me," he replied with a sigh. Was he angry? Yes, but there wasn't a point in expressing it. It wouldn't change anything and Tsunade was still the Hokage. It was a position Naruto respected, even if it was a dream that had been taken away from him. The blonde Hokage slowly nodded. Clearly, Naruto wasn't happy. She knew he wouldn't be. He was owed that. "Yeah, I wish the circumstances were different too. Truth be told, you wouldn't have been in the village if not for Yugao. She's vouching for you, brat. For her sake, if no one else's, make sure you're on your best behavior. This is a very critical crisis," she said. "Don't patronize me, Ba-chan. I get it. Can we just get started already? I was on my own personal mission before Ka-chan called for me," he said. It seemed a little anger couldn't help seeping through. All three in the room took notice of it and Tsunade sighed. "Right, come with me," she said, standing up and walking out the door. Naruto and Kushina followed her out. The three walked into a room on the third floor of the mansion. Tsunade opened the door and the three stepped inside. "Yes, Naruto, we need you to help us locate the Jashin members. Now what we do with them will be up in the air. We can't let it be known that we're onto them. We especially can't let them leak any more information. For now, I've set up a cabinet of trustworthy individuals that'll help us with this problem. I can't promise that you'll be let into the village after this assignment, but it'll go a long way into showing your goodwill," she said. Goodwill. Was that what they were calling it now? Tsunade touched the side of the wall and the three were immediately teleported from the Hokage mansion and deep into the ground below. So far down were they that it became almost unbearably hot. Naruto noticed the facility was entirely covered in rock like that of a cave. Even touching the rocks nearly burned his hand if he didn't jerk it away fast enough. "Be careful. This facility was created and managed by your father. The seal on the wall back in the Hokage mansion can only be activated by one bearing the title of Hokage. It's a place that's only used in the most dire situations like this one. For the sake of its security only the Hokage and one other person knows where it's located and this information changes nearly every day. We're all gonna be very busy," she said before the three stood in front of a massive set of doors made entirely of bronze metal, covered in the insignia of Konoha. The Hokage grabbed the doors and opened them. Naruto and Kushina saw Kakashi, Makoto, Yugao, Sasuke, Shikaku, Inoichi, Ibiki, the head Anbu, Kaharu, and Homura all seated around a massive meeting table carved from the rock around the cavern. "Both of you, take your seats," she ordered. Kushina took a seat and Naruto spotted the rest of his teammates. Well, perhaps he should say his former teammates. He closed his eyes and sighed. He pulled open a chair and sat next to Sasuke. Tsunade stood in front of everyone. "Thank you all for coming here. As you might know, Konoha's facing a dire situation. Within our home is the Jashin cult. We have no idea where they are or what they're hoping to accomplish. What we do know is that the cult of slaughter is here. As it stands, I want everyone to be fully aware that this is a cabinet of my most trusted officials. As of right now, we might as well consider the possibility that everyone in this room are the last remnants of a loyal Konoha. 3721. Chapter 64. Quote, men are anxious to improve their circumstances, but are unwilling to improve themselves, they therefore remain bound. The man who does not shrink from self-crucifixion can never fail to accomplish the object upon which his heart is set. This is true of earthly as of heavenly things. Even the man whose object is to acquire wealth must be prepared to make great personal sacrifices before he can accomplish his object, and how much more so he who would realize a strong and well-poised life. By James Allen. The members of Tsunade's cabinet sat around the table, each of them taking in the information that had been given to them. Inoichi glanced at Naruto and slowly nodded. I see. That's why you brought Naruto-san back into the village. I'll admit, I struggled with the comprehension of him having a contract with the god of death. That actually makes the revival of the Uzumaki clan. While I have concerns about disturbing the rest of the dead, I fear we will need their aid, he said. Shikaku leaned back in his chair and hummed, eyeing Kaharu for a moment. Speaking of that, why did the Jashin clan even target the Uzumaki clan? If they've been hiding for over 10 years in the village, then what about the Uzumaki clan would make them risk exposure? They had to realize we would investigate them. Do you have any idea why, Naruto? Shikaku asked. Soon, all eyes were on Naruto. The patriarch of the Uzumaki clan frowned, placing his arms on the table. Yeah, he assumed this story would have come out eventually. It wasn't like he wasn't willing to tell them, he just wondered about the sheer believability of it. After all, not too many people can say they met some manifestation of the kami, the greatest divine being. Naruto remembered laying his eyes upon her. He remembered her very soothing, yet powerful voice. With but a thought she could devastate every world and every being. It was actually a rather life-changing experience. Still, he was aware he was treading on thin ice with Konoha as it was. This was a very tense situation where trust was in very short supply. He wouldn't get anything from lying now. I wasn't really sure of the reason, but the shinigami invited me to a meeting of sorts. My mother and I went with him. I'll skip the details, but it was a meeting between divine beings. There was a big table of the celestial bodies just like this one, with observers in the stands. We were one of those observers. I saw the manifestation of Jashin speak with the shinigami. I wasn't entirely sure on the politics of the meeting, but it seemed that my privileges as a summoner of death warranted attention. In an attempt to rectify the act, Jashin tried to maneuver his followers to assassinate my family while they slept. However, the shinigami saved them and I was offered the chance to meet with Kami, he said. You met Kami, as in the god of all celestial beings? Homura asked while Naruto nodded. Goddess, and yeah, that was how I knew they infiltrated the compound. They'd done it on that god's orders, he said. Tsunade and the others turned to Kushina. She nodded her head. Indeed, that was a surreal experience for her. She'd never imagined meeting such a woman in her lifetime. The head Anbu leaned back and stared at the ceiling. What are the lives of men but the playthings of the gods, he said, everyone turning to him. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose before Ibiki cleared his throat. So the reasons for this might be because of the gods themselves. Damn it, he said. The man had never been religious, but if this was where the road was headed, then what left was there to doubt? Besides, how the hell could they stand against a cult with the backing of a god behind them? Whether the gods are involved or not, it doesn't matter. We are dealing with their servants and followers, not divine themselves. We must simply do what we must to protect the village. At this time, we should first start with the obvious. We should begin locating these members that we can and start monitoring them. With that, we have our chess pieces in place, Shikaku said, turning to Naruto. The others did as well and Tsunade exhaled. Naruto, begin please, she said. The blonde nodded and stood to his feet. Does anyone have any papers? You'd better write down what I say, cause I'm gonna be doing a lot of talking, he said. Everyone took out sheets of paper as Naruto walked over to a side of the room and closed his eyes. He sat down, taking a pose of meditation he often used when he wanted to be alone. Alright, while I'm doing this, who's merging with me next? Naruto asked. I would be honored, Naruto-sama, Gari replied before he sat down amongst the other spirits as well. He quickly merged his spirit with Naruto. The young summoner inhaled and exhaled slowly. The others gasped as the rocks around the Uzumaki clan head's body started to tremble. After a moment, Naruto's hair lost its blonde color. The members of Hinoken sat amused, watching the astonishment grow on the faces of the rest of the cabinet. The ground beneath Naruto's feet cracked and the pebbles were blown away. His hair turned as pure as silver and so did his eyes. A white cloak appeared on his shoulders before he stood to his feet. No one in the room was exempt from the feeling of death upon them. Not even Tsunade nor the Anbu commander could shake the feeling of the shinigami looming over all of them. All who have suffered under the hand of the Jushinist cult within Konoha in the last 20 years come before me, Naruto ordered. Oh my god, Koharu said more to herself as the overwhelming heat inside the cave system suddenly grew cold. It got so cold, Homura could see his breath floating in front of him. However, that paled to the sight of at least 200 spirits appearing in front of the cabinet. Using Naruto's vast, nigh divine power as their anchor, the subjects of the Shinigami's realm manifested themselves before everyone. Hell, the other members of the cabinet noticed Kushina started to change as well. Her red hair became just like Naruto's, silver in color and divine in radiance. If they all had any lesser will, they might have bowed their heads in reverence of the ethereal appearance of the two Uzumaki. Nevertheless, everyone stayed silent as they watched the spirits line up in front of Naruto. As their lord, they all paid him the proper respects. Each of them bowed their heads, prostrating themselves with their foreheads on the ground. I would have never believed it if I didn't see it with my own eyes, Inoichi whispered to Shikaku. The head of the Nara clan nodded before Naruto's eyes turned pure white. Find them for me. I will exact vengeance in your name, he said. By your will, Shikyo-sama, the victims of the Jushinists residing in Konoha said before they floated off through the ceiling of the cavern at great speeds. Be careful, brat, they'll only be to locate the ones that killed them. They won't be able to find the ones who've controlled their urges and lead the groups unless properly linked. Also, brat, I don't like this plan by your Hokage. Something feels wrong to me, the Kyuubi said, which got some shock from the spirits around him. Something feels wrong. What do you mean? Pakura asked while Kimimaro, Suiren, Yahiko, and even Gari narrowed their eyes. I'm not sure how to explain it. Let's just wait and see. And you, stay focused. Kyuubi ordered, making Gari stiffen. The former Iwa Nin quickly focused himself one more, however everyone felt an inexplicable sense of dread from the Kyuubi's words. Meanwhile, Naruto groaned much to the concern of everyone else. A trail of blood fell off the side of his mouth. Kakashi and Makoto stood up, concerned for their teammate. Why's he bleeding? That never happened, Sasuke said before Kushina hushed him. Everyone continued to observe as Naruto connected his Honsho with the over 200 spirits. With this, he could see exactly what they saw. Each of them races throughout the village. Someone get ready to write, he said. Shikaku and the Anbu commander nodded. We are ready, Naruto-san, Inoichi said, and Naruto began speaking the names of the people he observed. Sasuke, Kakashi, and Makoto activated their Sharingan, following the movements of his lips. 3 hours passed as one by one, the spirits pointed him to some that shocked the cabinet. Aside from the struggling Uzumaki and Uchiha clans, there was at least one Jashin member in the major clans of Konoha. Shikaku and Inoichi widened their eyes as Sasuke, Kakashi, and Makoto tried to keep up with Naruto's intel as much as possible. Koharu felt a bead of sweat fall down the side of her face while Homura narrowed his eyes. Tsunade clenched her fists as the list seemed to get longer and longer. Yugao knelt next to Blonde, wiping the blood away from the side of his mouth and the corners of his eyes. Nevertheless, Naruto continued to speak. 1 name turned into 10. 10 turned into 50. 50 turned into 100. 100 finally turned into 300 before Naruto felt his consciousness break away from the task. Sweat on his face, he fell back into Yugao's arms. She quickly grabbed him while Kushina ran to check on him. Is he alright? Shikaku asked. Tsunade stood to her feet and walked over to him, coating her palm in green chakra. Naruto panted while she touched his forehead. He's fine, just fatigued. It seems managing so many spirits at once was too much for him. It's probably even worse than the backlash one would receive from the cage bunshin technique, she replied before Yugao gave the young man to his mother. Kushina took him, but he quickly woke and leaned up. I'm not done. There's a lot more of them. There's over 2,000 of them still left, he growled. 2,000, Inoichi exclaimed while Ibiki bit his thumb and growled. It's more than even Pakun spoke about, Kakashi said while Kushina rubbed her son's head. She turned to the rest of the cabinet. No, Sochi, you've done enough for now. What we needed was a start and we've got enough, but it's clear that they've grown somehow or Pa-kun couldn't identify all of them. Well, he said there were over 1,000 signatures. He never specified how many, Sasuke answered before Makoto tapped her finger on the table. Well, we at least have a lot of names to reference from. I suggest we save the clan members for later. Remember, they are an organized group. They'll instantly know if we start sectioning off the suspicious members, she replied. The head Anbu hummed. It wouldn't do good to lock down the village either. As it stands, we will have to proceed with extreme caution, he said. As Naruto caught his breath, Kushina stood up and turned to Tsunade. Well, we're not gonna get anywhere like this. We also shouldn't remain gone for too long. They'll be suspicious of the Hokage's not doing her usual duties. Once we leave, we'll need files on all of these people. If it's me, I can grab at least 2 in 10 minutes. Ibiki and Inoichi should be on standby. Once Sochi recovers, he can grab another 2 more. We'll have to pick a place to hold them. That won't be a problem, Sasuke said, eyeing his mother and Kakashi. Both chuckled, but nodded. Homura leaned forward. The village is vast. How can you possibly get to them in these timeframes? He asked. Sorry, Homura-san, trade Uzumaki secret, but don't worry. My son and I are pretty fast, she remarked. After this, another hour of planning passed for the cabinet before Tsunade dismissed them all. She ended the meeting on the note that they would all reconvene when Kushina and Naruto dropped their targets off here. A proper channel of communication would be made at a later date. As for now, Kakashi volunteered to stay behind along with Inoichi and Ibiki. Tsunade took Kushina out and the two stood on top of the Hokage mansion. Can you really do it in 5 minutes? She asked, handing a profile of her target to her. For every citizen in Konoha, there was a profile in the Hokage's archives only accessible to the Hokage. Kushina smirked. Let's find out, she said as she held up a hand sign. Kukanyugami no Jutsu, she called out, expanding her honsho to cover the entire village. One by one, everything stopped moving around her. The matriarch of the Uzumaki clan smirked before she jumped on the railing and dashed off as fast as she could. Pushing herself as fast as she could, Kushina flew through the myriad of people. As an experienced kunoichi, her eyes moved left and right, scanning every face and body type. Her target was supposed to live on the far east side of the village. With her speed, that wasn't something impossible. However, obviously it wasn't a given that the person would be there. However, Kushina ran like he was. She ran like the fucking village would explode if she didn't. In 2 minutes, short of breath, her heart beating in her ears, she made it to the other side of the village. When she landed on the ground, she looked around for the target. It was a middle-aged man with a rather slim build. She looked at the photo again, trying to use every trick in the book that she learned from her career to find her target. Damn it, where the hell are you? She asked as she ran up and down the street. Thankfully, luck seemed to be with Kushina. She looked down a dark alleyway and she widened her eyes. She saw her target walking through it. Just before the jutsu could wear off, she slammed her fist in his face. Once time resumed, the man screamed with his head crashing into the side of the wall, knocking him out. He fell to the ground and Kushina reactivated the jutsu. She picked him up and raced back to the Hokage mansion. Once she appeared back in front of Tsunade, Kushina wrapped up the target's mouth, bound his arms, and wrapped his legs. If she wanted to be straight cruel, she'd cut his tendons so he couldn't run. Unfortunately, their plan required him walking. She deactivated the jutsu and appeared next to Tsunade. Done, she said, huffing hard. Tsunade blinked and noticed the man in Kushina's grasp. The Godime took the file on the target. Upon verifying him, she nodded and quickly brought Kushina back to the cabinet's location. The two entered and saw everyone around the table. Work your magic, Ibiki-san, Kushina said as she threw the Jushinist on the table. The others stood surprised. It's really only been 10 minutes. How did you get him so quickly? Homura asked in shock while the female Uzumaki smiled. Clan secret. Also, be sure to check his body for cyanide pills. We don't need him croaking cause we were lax, she said. Tsunade nodded and grabbed some gloves from her pocket. Any self-respecting medic always kept at least one pair on hand. She snapped them on and quickly began inspecting the man for any traces of potential suicide options. She opened his mouth and checked between his teeth. She checked his nails and every other corner of his body, stripping him down until he was naked. To the shock of those present, there were at least 10 different places for suicide discovered on the man. Tsunade turned to Ibiki, Inoichi, and Kakashi. He's all yours. I want a report of your findings in the hour. Until then, everyone else is set to on-call status. I don't care what you're doing. If I need you, then you'll have to be here. Dismissed, she said. Everyone agreed. The head Anbu quickly left. Kaharu gave Naruto one more glance before she and Homura exited the facility as well. Sasuke grabbed a hold of his mother's hand, smiling before they wished Kakashi luck and departed. Kushina grabbed her son's arm and both made themselves scarce. Yugao walked next to Kakashi and took out a scroll. I'll write down notes. We'll need to record all this information presented. I'll also set up a secure location for it, she replied. An extra set of hands will always be appreciated, Inoichi said as Ibiki stretched his wrists. He raised his hand and slapped the Jushinist across the face. The intense pain shook the man awake. What the? He asked before he saw who he was surrounded by. He quickly took notice of Ibiki, Inoichi, along with a masked Yugao and Kakashi. The masks were an extra precaution for the two members of Hinoken. Who are you? Why am I here? Arg. The man shouted in pain when he was stabbed in the leg. You're not asking the questions here. We are. You can make it easy or you can make it difficult. For my sake, I hope you choose the latter. I'll be upgrading your stay while you're in our luxurious care. Now, how about we talk about the god of slaughter, Jashin? Ibiki asked as the Jushinist widened his eyes. His terrified eyes turned to Inoichi, Yugao, and Kakashi. The menacing aura radiating from the three Jonin shinobi was enough to instill great fear throughout the core of the captive. His eyes widened when Ibiki pulled out a pair of pliers. His lips curved upwards. Kushina helped Naruto through the door. The aftereffects of his information gathering clearly took their toll on him more than she thought. You sure you don't need to go to the hospital? She asked while he laughed. Promise, I'll be fine. I just need a minute to catch my breath. Besides, staying with you always makes me happy, he said. Kushina nodded and led him up the stairs. She took him into their shared bed and rested him there. As Naruto laid down, she brushed a hand through his hair. You would have made a fantastic Hokage, Sochi, Kushina said as she caressed his cheek. Naruto frowned for a moment, but soon smiled as he caressed his mother's hand. I'd have made a worse one without you by my side, he said, making his mother blush before she slapped his shoulder. Honestly, not even Minato was that cheeky when they were living together. Still, that was one of the many things she'd learned to love about her son, her man, her soon-to-be spouse. Speaking of by your side, I think we have a little bit of time and we'd better keep up appearances to the rest of the Jushinists. You're not supposed to be in the village, so you'll have to stay here, but perhaps now is the only downtime we'll have to discuss our plans. I think we're making Yuri-chan suffer. So, would you like a traditional wedding or a more modern one? Kushina asked while Naruto laughed. Hey, I'm the man here. I should be asking you that, he laughed in pain while Kushina kissed the top of his head. She slowly nodded. So, then start asking. I need something to distract me from this miserable situation the village is in, she said as she laid next to him. Naruto chuckled and turned to her, wincing in pain a little bit. So, Ka-chan, which would you like, traditional or modern? He asked. The mother of the blonde stared into his eyes and grinned. Well, we sure aren't the traditional couple databane. I had a traditional one with Minato. With this one, I will devote my entire life to you. You and no other will I take for a spouse as long as we both shall live. Just make sure, I have a great place in your heart, she replied. Naruto laughed. You know, I think you've had a place even before I knew who you were. I swear I'll make you happy. No matter what happens, I'll always love you, cherish you, and make you never regret your choice, he said. Kushina smiled and kissed her son. I know you will. You're my son after all, she said. Naruto firmly nodded and the two stayed in silence for a little while before Naruto felt Gari's spirit merge with his again. He inhaled and exhaled slowly before his eyes remained more focused. And where do you want it to be? He asked. Kushina stared at her son, confused. Well, I hear Suna has exotic places. Kumo's also known for its unorthodox resorts. I bet even Mei-chan's got some recommendations, he said while Kushina slowly shook her head. You've researched this quite a bit, she said before he nodded. Because you deserve the best I have to offer, he said, and she leaned up with a sigh. I never had the chance to get married in my homeland. A place of my old life to begin my new one. I can't think of a better one. The island has wonderful catering and we have rituals there that we can only have on the island. Plus, we can have the reception either at the compound or back in the village itself. Personally, I wasn't much for big crowds. As long as we have friends, then I don't mind, she said. Feeling better, Naruto leaned up and took off his clothes. Kushina bit her lip as she stared at her son while he slowly got dressed into some other clothes. Since he was back in the village, he'd take the time to continue his training with Gari. Preferably, he'd do so with Fujika's and Kushina there to help him. You should also think about who you want to invite. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll have too many differences in opinion when it comes to those. A lot of your friends are also my friends, she said. He laughed as he grabbed his sword and walked out. She followed after him, grabbing her sword as well. The two left the compound, spotting Shizune and Ebisu working themselves hard along with the other hired workers. How are they doing? He asked as he watched the two interact. Kushina shook her head. I'm not sure honestly. I want to get them some help, but I'm not sure where to start. I've kept them busy just to keep their minds off it, but they will need to come to terms with what happened. Only then will they be able to move on and rebuild themselves back to who they used to be. This situation actually came at an inopportune time. I'd rather not send them to a Jushinist, no matter how small the possibility is, she replied as the two entered the Uzumaki clan's private training area. As expected, both saw Fujika's sitting on the ground. The hero of the Land of Iron sat beneath a tree with his sword at his side. Scattered around him were hundreds of leaves, their bodies split in two pieces. Greetings, Naruto-sama. It's been some time since I last saw you. Your spirit has grown stronger since you last stood before me. However, I also noticed some hesitance within you, much more than when you first summoned me. Is everything well with you? He asked. Naruto laughed, rubbing the back of his head. Well, they could be better. In fact, I need you and Ka-chan for training to help me figure out where that hesitance is coming from. Besides, I haven't practiced myself in much sealing arts as of late. I'd rather not embarrass the clan if the patriarch isn't good at it, he said. Fujika smiled and stood to his feet. I understand, Naruto-sama. May my blade raise yours to the very heavens themselves, the samurai said, grabbing his sword. Kushina grabbed her own and Naruto felt the ancient energies of divine power circulate through his body. He slowly exhaled and grinned, grabbing his blade as well. A burst of spiritual pressure radiated from his body. Sasuke and Makoto arrived home. The Uchiha heir helped his mother inside. You know, Sasuke, just because I lost an eye doesn't mean I'm an invalid. That said, I'm glad you're still continuing to grow up to be quite the gentleman, Makoto said while Sasuke opened the door. Had I been stronger, you wouldn't be like this, he said as they walked inside. He closed the door and Makoto laughed as she took off her shoes. It comes with the profession, Sasuke. I've endured a lot of injuries and a lot of scars. You don't have to keep telling me. I know, Sasuke said as he stepped inside. Makoto watched her son leave the hallway, grabbing one of the doors and closing it. After a moment, she took note of his mood. Clearly, her son wasn't happy about something. She wondered if it was the situation with the village. Sasuke hadn't gotten much sleep since the revelation of the Jushinists. It was hard to act normal when the enemy could be literally anywhere. For a few minutes, Makoto returned to her room, sighing and staring out into the village. Well, the portion of it that she could see anyway. It was hard to go back to a somewhat normal life with this new knowledge. However, they all had to make the best of it. She changed her clothes and walked downstairs. She noticed her son sitting at the table, a cup of coffee in his hands. Her son's gaze didn't seem focused on it though. When Makoto looked at him, she smiled. Her son looked so different from before. Rather surprised, she remembered the time back at the daimyo's palace. She grabbed a seat and sat in front of Sasuke. Sasuke, talk to me. What's the matter? Makoto asked as she stared at her son. Nothing, he replied. Sasuke, I'm your mother. I know you, she answered. Sasuke snorted. You haven't been my mother for almost 9 years, he replied with a deep frown on his face. While that statement did hurt, Makoto inhaled and exhaled. No, I suppose not. I'm way beyond the influential days when you could have needed me. I realize that, but you're still my son. That's never gonna change. It's a mother's duty to care for her son and guide him. Let me rack up the years now, providing you what guidance I can, she said. Sasuke clenched his fists and exhaled. I'm not strong enough, he finally said, pushing his cup away. Makoto raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? You're my son. Of course you're strong, she said before she stiffened when he slammed his fist on the table. Not strong enough to protect you. Not only was I captured, but you lost one of your eyes because I couldn't move fast enough, he replied. Sasuke, I'm a kunoichi. I'm aware of our line of work and I'm aware that you did the best you could. There isn't. When has my best ever been enough? He said as he stood up. The Uchiha heir walked around the table and grabbed his mother's shoulders. She widened her eyes when he tightened his grip. My best wasn't enough when Itachi killed you both. I couldn't get revenge for the clan. My best wasn't enough to surpass him in the academy. My best wasn't enough to pass Kakashi's stupid bell test. My best wasn't enough to defeat Haku on my own. My best wasn't enough to protect Sakura and Naruto from Orochimaru. My best wasn't enough to beat Gaara. Somewhere in my head, I knew my best wasn't even enough to defeat Itachi on my own. What's going to happen when I'm not strong enough and Naruto can't bring us back? He asked. Then we'll all have to get stronger. It's not just you, Sasuke. Just like you want to. I did what I did so I could. Makoto suddenly grew worried when Sasuke clenched her shirt and dropped to his knees. Are you really going to make me see you die a second time? Sasuke asked, staring at his mother. His question shook his mother to her core. While it wasn't in Sasuke to cry, at least in front of someone else, the pain on his face spoke volumes to her. On her shoulders, she felt his fingers tremble. Sasuke shook his head. Yuna, if I don't have you both, if I'm not strong enough, he didn't finish. In fact, he couldn't finish. He just the what if hang in the air for his mother to decipher however she wanted. Instead, Sasuke placed a hand on her cheek. Makoto felt oddly silent, unaware that she hadn't even blinked yet. The resolve in her son's eyes made her breath go short. Makoto watched her son slowly stand to his feet, still speechless. I dreamt of the many times I would speak to you like this, more often than I can count. Naruto, that dobe, gave me back the life I'd lost. Now, I'm gonna make sure no one else takes it away from me. While I still have mixed thoughts about this village, I'll protect the place you stay in, Sasuke said as grabbed his sword and walked out the door. Makoto watched her son leave and suddenly found herself able to breathe. She touched her chest and stilled. She could hear the drums wailing away. Wait, where was he going? Tsunade sighed, working through her reports. She finally put one of them down and sighed. She looked at the door to her office for what was maybe the fourth or fifth time today. Still no word from Kakashi, Ibiki, and Inoichi. It left her rather tense, especially since she didn't know who the hell she was supposed to be trusting. Luckily, as an expert kunoichi, she'd been used to maintaining a neutral gaze. Hell, her lengthy, if pathetic, gambling career played on that strength rather well. That said, if there was one thing Tsunade missed, it was having someone to talk to in her office. She stared at the spot where Shizune would have stood had she still been an employed shinobi under Konoha. The blonde Hokage felt very conflicted. She knew this job wasn't supposed to be easy. Difficult choices had to be made all the time for the betterment of the village. However, she was still human. She couldn't help wondering if maybe she'd made a lot of the wrong choices. As a Hokage, she'd commend herself for the firm decision. She just couldn't play favorites. It would be a death of her as a leader, both political and militaristic. However, as a friend, she should have done something to help Shizune. When Tsunade was in a pitiful state, Shizune had bent over backwards to help her, especially with her more irresponsible tendencies. Then, she effectively crushed Naruto's dream as Hokage. As a rule of the village, since its founding, a person banished from the nation couldn't become the Hokage. That was a document signed with the greatest effect of the daimyo and the Hokage. It was instilled when her granduncle, Senju Tobirama, had become the Nadaime Hokage. This was enforced so to reduce the possibility of a corrupted spy making it into the office. Her granduncle would tell her that this was just one of the many dreams to be destroyed in the safety of the village, but it was that dream that brought her back anyway. She saw the way Naruto looked at her. He was professional and calm, an excellent example of the Uzumaki clan as its patriarch. Yet, she saw that he'd far from forgiven her. It would probably be a long time before they were on speaking terms like before. She just didn't know what she should do to repair their relationship. Everything seemed to be so complex lately. Tsunade noticed she'd stopped her work and continued. She wondered if she should hire another assistant. She didn't much like this silence. She also had trouble sleeping recently. Turned out that finding out an entire cult of mass murderers didn't do well for sleep, especially when she couldn't tell if they were amongst those guarding her. She hoped she got an update soon. Unfortunately, Tsunade wouldn't get her update for another 4 hours. That left her with going around the village, signing off on important buildings, making public appearances, sending shinobi to here and there for important missions. When she was finally allowed to return to her office, she was met with Jiraiya. She frowned and sighed. She didn't even feel like being hostile. "When did you get back?" she asked. "Probably 10 minutes ago. I received your message and hurried back to the village as fast as I could." "You look beat," he said. Tsunade rolled her shoulders and sighed. At times like this, Dan would have given her a massage, but that certainly wasn't happening. She also didn't have it in her to ask Naruto to revive her former lover. Even if he did, they belonged to two different worlds. Tsunade grumbled. "Yeah, well, knowing what I now know, I think I've got a right to feel beat." "You got a problem with that?" she asked. Jiraiya held up his hands in defense and shook his head. "Not at all. Shall I give you a shoulder massage? You can brief me on the specifics of this situation in the meantime," he said. Tsunade glared at her former teammate for a moment. Thoughts of Dan flooded her mind. Thoughts of Naruto came as well, and the concept of death. She remembered when Dan and Naoki hugged her. The former made it pretty clear that what they had would always remain, but life wasn't so simple that one could survive on what used to be. The Hokage sighed. "I must be fucking stupid. Just my shoulders. If those hands go any lower, I'm not telling Naruto to revive you," she exclaimed, which got a stunned expression from the male Sannin. He looked at her shocked. "Huh, you're letting me do it?" he asked, a little skeptical. "I'm tired and drunk. Just do it before I realize how stupid I'm being," she said as her heels clacked across the floor. Jiraiya slowly watched her take a seat while she grabbed another stack. He blinked. He was kinda out of his element right now. As Jiraiya took stock of this situation, he knew Tsunade was lying. Ever since the time when she'd made that bet, she hadn't taken a sip of sake. It was definitely something he thought utterly impossible. She was completely aware of his actions. If she had been drunk, he wouldn't have taken advantage of the situation. At least, he wouldn't with her. He wasn't that much of a scumbag. He wondered if she'd been replaced by an alien, but she definitely seemed the same. Tsunade stared at him and frowned. "If you're just gonna stare at me, then you can get out as well. I'll call you when I need you. We made plans anyway. I've got enough on my mind without." "Ah, right. Sorry," Jiraiya said before he moved behind Tsunade and touched her shoulders. He then proceeded with firmly rubbing her shoulders, making sure to not do anything that would make him regret this situation. Tsunade sighed and stretched her neck. Jiraiya was a little clumsy, but she'd take what she could get. "So what of the problem?" he asked while Tsunade shook her head. "I said I'd." She didn't get to finish before a knock on the door came. "Should I stop?" the white-haired man asked. "Shut up and keep going," she said as she called for the door to be opened. Just as she hoped, Ibiki and Inoichi came through. The former was wiping his gloves. The two noticed the two Sannin, but didn't reply to the situation. It wasn't their business anyway. The two just nodded and Tsunade nodded as well. She moved Jiraiya off her shoulders and the four left. Jiraiya was taken to the cabinet's facility. "How's it going?" Tsunade asked and Inoichi nodded. "Well, unfortunately, this Jushinist seems to be a very minor warrior in the cult. However, we at least know how they receive their orders. We also saw that they tend to meet on the 3rd, 10th, and 20th of every month. This man was only a civilian, so his role was just to mingle in the village. They work in groups of 5. We'll have to send him back out soon before they find out he's missing. Kakashi has currently placed him in a genjutsu. We've already set up a suggestion for him. He'll be feeding us information and he's already given us the names of his team members. Once Naruto and Kushina have rested, we can get a hold of them as well," he said. Tsunade frowned. Are there any chances of Kakashi's genjutsu being spotted? She asked. There is always a chance of it being broken, but we think it shouldn't be likely. I've removed his memory of this entire situation. Lady Tsunade, we'd appreciate it if you healed him. We have to make sure there's no signs of injury on him. We'll also believe it wouldn't be best to reconvene until the end of the week. It'll be risky, but we can't let them know that we meet on a regular basis. We can have Katsuyu-sama to bring us all together, he suggested. As the four walked, Tsunade filled in Jiraiya on the situation at hand. The man's expression got more and more grave as the Hokage filled him in. The four entered the room where they saw Kakashi leaning against the wall with the prisoner. Said prisoner was tied up and unconscious. The four took note of the man's gruesome injuries. As expected, the smell of blood was prevalent. Tsunade quickly got to work healing the man to the best of her abilities. Truly, Ibiki earned his reputation as the head of torture and interrogation. Very efficient, if gritty work. Where are the others? Jiraiya asked. Ibiki leaned on the table with Inoichi. We dismissed the council members. Naruto-san and Kushina-san went home. Whatever they did to reach our target can't be done until tomorrow. Plus, I think we overtaxed Naruto with the spirits that he used. As for everyone else, there's not much for them to do, so we sent them home. We have them walking around the village casually. We hope that the Jishinists, having been comfortable for so long, will give us some tells now that we're aware of them. Yugao's currently moving through the village under the guise of an extended break, he answered. Jiraiya slowly nodded. I see. Then I will join the search as well. I have a reason to be back in the village, so they shouldn't suspect me if I show up. Besides, I'm better at detecting people than anyone here. I'll see what's going on in this village, he said. Inoichi hummed. Just make sure you keep your unscrupulous activities in check, Jiraiya-sama. You have a habit of getting distracted even in the most dire circumstances. Since you're here, I'll transfer all of the knowledge that we've learned thus far, the head of the Yamanaka said as he touched the Sanin's forehead. Like a movie at the theater on fast forward, the information was pushed into Jiraiya's head. Out of the corner of her eye, Tsunade watched the interaction out of the corner of her eye. Once the process was finished, Jiraiya rubbed his chin. They're a little better than I thought. The issue is, what are we going to do to those who can't withhold their lust for bloodshed? We can't very well just let them do what they please, he said. Kakashi stepped forward. No one's saying we should. However, it might be something we're beating over the bush with, but we have to tread carefully. As Yugao stated, they've been here for almost 2 decades, maybe even longer. They aren't stupid. More than likely, they must treat this like some kind of cheat day. Say every 5 to 6 months, someone gets to participate in a kill of their choice. Of course, it can't be someone high profile either. It would draw too much attention. What we need to do is figure out what they're here for. We also need to make sure that they're not feeding information to the other nations, he replied. One thing at a time, Kakashi. For now, we'll see about setting up our own network in their organization. Jiraiya, you'll be the point of contact and those under us. I want us to nib this little infestation as quickly as possible. She exclaimed. Jiraiya grinned and nodded. You can count on me, Haim. I see a busy couple of days ahead. The man said before he walked out of the room. Meanwhile, Tsunade finished healing their target. How are we going to drop him off? She asked. Kakashi smiled. Leave that to me, Hokage-sama. The one-eyed Hinokan member said with a smile beneath his mask. Kushina widened her eyes as she saw her son's blade mere inches from her neck. A bead of sweat fell down the side of her face. Even Fujika's was a little surprised as both saw the clear fury in Naruto's eyes. His hands trembled and the spirit of rage was met in his eyes. Slowly, Kushina caressed her son's cheek and the maddening anger inside him was soon quelled. Naruto dropped to his knees and panted as his white hair slowly returned to normal. His body was covered in slashes and cuts. Kushina and Fujika's sheathed their blades as the former surveyed the battlefield. Innumerable trees had been toppled over, the ground overturned by vicious slashes and curved earth. Finally, Kushina sighed. All right, I think that's enough. Clearly, this isn't working, she said as she rubbed her neck. She saw just a little bit of blood on the tips of her fingers. Had Gari not retaken control from the evil spirit that possessed her son, her head would have been taken clean off. It was, rather chilling, the rage and the inferno that just screamed for death, destruction and chaos. She never thought she'd see such anger in the eyes of her son. Chiriku, who'd been watching per Kushina's instructions, narrowed his eyes. There was something they were missing. Something within Naruto wasn't at peace with itself. However, it became aware to him that this wasn't something conscious. It was something buried deep in his heart that none of them were aware of. However, no one was more aware of this than Naruto himself. He remembered swinging his sword as he staved off the assault from his mother and the hero of iron. He remembered the joy on his face as he and Gari slowly continued to melt further and further. It felt just like the last time when he'd picked up a sword. However, it wasn't long for Gari's voice to slowly get further and further away. There seemed to be something frantic, but soon Naruto was filled with great power. When he swung his sword, he saw the fear in Fujikaze's face. He saw the shock in his mother's face when one slash of his blade felled an entire acre of trees. His mind thought of what he could do with this power. His mind thought of the grief he'd been forced to endure all his life because he wasn't strong enough. No one would dare throw away his dreams again. Everyone would kneel or fall into their own ruin. Why stop at Hokage? Why keep such a meager title? With him at the helm, the Uzumaki clan would rise to the greatest prominence. No, the whole world would. All this fighting, all this suffering, all of this neglect from stupid principles, different ideologies, and never-ending wars for petty reasons, all of them would stop if he was at the head of it all. King. No. Emperor. No. God. Yes, the god of the elemental nations. With this power, I will use you to rule the nations themselves. Soon, Naruto's swings weren't his own. He swung, but he didn't remember doing it. He laughed, but he didn't remember what was funny. It was like his body wasn't his own. He was swimming through a sea of darkness and rage that was his own confusion. All the while a powerful, dark entity attached itself to him, exerting its will over him, feeding off the anger within him that he couldn't find. As Naruto sat there in the torn battlefield, his mother came to him. She grabbed his cheeks and held him in front of her. Sochi, it's okay. We'll find out what's wrong with you. Tell you what, let's just relax for today. No training and no sessions. We're under enough stress with the threat of the Jishinists as it is. Here I am burdening you with too much. When was the last time you had a proper break? She asked. Naruto didn't answer his mother. Instead, he focused on that scar on her neck. He'd almost killed his mother. He would have had no one to blame but himself. Ka-chan, you and Fujikaze-san go back to the house. I need to be alone, Naruto said. Kushina opened her lips, but she saw the tremble in her son's arms. Slowly, she held her head down. Alright, Sochi, just be careful. We'll beat this, whatever it is. I left you alone before. I won't make the same mistake this time, she said, her heart broken from the sight of her normally confident son. Yet, she wasn't sure what to do. Chiriku's lessons seemed to be working, but they weren't quick. If only something like this had been addressed when he was a young man, then they could have spent 2 years working with him. Hell, it had only been 2 or 3 days since their talk with the Shinigami. However, it seemed like this problem had showcased itself ever since Naruto first gained the contract. No, perhaps this problem had been with him ever since he'd been a young boy. Unfortunately, they all seemed to be bumbling through the dark without much help. Kushina stood up, kissing her son on his forehead. She left and so did Fujikaze. The latter bowed and Naruto was left alone in the field. Hey, left alone. Yeah, maybe that was the best for someone like the blonde. Maybe he was better off alone. Naruto stood up and grabbed his sword. What am I even doing? He asked as he sheathed his blade. Despite how tired he was, he didn't feel any huffing in his breath. The sun was hot on his face and there was no wind in the air. There was nothing to bring him relief like usual. For a time, Naruto disappeared into the trees. He walked quietly through them. He touched some of the branches and barks. His feet touched the grass and he watched the sun peer through the openings in the leaves. He exhaled, his breath oddly easy. He looked down. He stared at the contract on his hand. After a moment, he clenched his skin and dropped to his knees. He clawed at the summoning circle so hard that the blood on his hand started to flow. What do I do? I swore to protect Ka-chan and the others of my family, but how can I protect them if I'm the problem? I don't know what's wrong with me. Kuso. Naruto shouted as he balled his fist and slammed it into the ground. He screamed over and over. Rage and frustration filled his mind. He grabbed his head and leaned it on one of the trees. "Shin, help me," Naruto said lowly as the young man felt the weight of his own expectations coming down upon him. Suddenly, the air around the blonde became cold. It almost seemed like the very air itself had been chilled by the hand of death itself. When he turned around, he saw the piercing gaze of the shinigami hovering over him, filled with divine power. His white robe continued to brim with the power of the souls of those within his domain. "Uzumaki Naruto," the god of death said as Naruto turned to him and wiped his face. "What do I do, Shin? Please tell me what to do. Ka-chan, and everyone else is struggling to help me and none of it seems to be working. Why can't you just tell me what's wrong with me? If you tell me, then I'll be able to fix it. As it is, I don't see why you gave me this contract. I'm not worth it," he exclaimed. Shin stared at his summoner, his eyes growing darker and darker. In fact, Naruto felt so small beneath them. What could he do to hide from the gaze of a god? In fact, he felt like his problems were so insignificant, something not worth Shin's time. Hell, a lot of this reminded the Uzumaki patriarch of his childhood. He was reminded of his life as an insignificance, when everyone thought less of him, when he had to try so hard to appear happy just so he could get from one day to the next. As I have observed of you mortals for many years, the journey of self-discovery and self-reflection has taken most of your lives, and some of you will never find it. I have high hopes for you. As I had commented when we first met formally, you interest me greatly. I would not provide a contract with someone I felt unworthy of it. If I am to tell you of your affliction, then you won't learn anything. Though you have begun your transformation, you are still bound by your human thoughts, chained to them in ways that make you easily susceptible. Perhaps it was that susceptibility of you that reminded me of how my brother used to be at times. However, I hear your suffering and your prayers, as well as the prayers of your priestess, continue to reach my ears, the Shinigami said as Naruto calmly listened to the god of death. The god of death, before his summoner's eyes, returned to his more human-like appearance. His pupil-less eyes reflected Naruto's curiosity within them. The Shinigami sat with Naruto. The blonde noticed that the longer the god of death sat in the grass, the faster life around them both seemed to fade away. Naruto quickly remembered that this was a god, a divine being. This was one beyond the thought processes of mortal men, the highest order of any concept of reality itself. Strange that even for his simplicity, even Naruto became aware of that great fact. Hell, he felt like his worries slowly seemed to meld away into a sense of understanding the longer he was honored to stare upon the man, especially one as timeless as death itself. Worry not, Uzumaki Naruto. Your answers will be brought to you very soon. Whether you accept them shall be upon you. That acceptance shall be whether you continue as my summoner or become a vessel for the maliciousness that connects the vile spirits to you. You told me that if you knew your problem, then you'd be able to take care of it. I have been alive since time immemorial and I have seen the very best and the very worst of not just humanity, but of every type of mortal being beyond the stars of your world. When you think of peace, its concept is very simple, is it not? Yet, why has no one been able to figure it out? Find the answer of yourself and perhaps you will find the answer to not just that question, but the questions that will make me see the very limits of not just your existence, but the existence of this world you reside in, he said before he faded away, leaving the young summoner alone.